Absolutely frightening. Live from the Trustmark Studios, Cliff Osbon has joined us, President and CEO or our co-founder of Steep Hill, Mississippi. We just heard the word Steep Hill not too long ago, and we were intrigued what it is and trying to just educate the people of the state of Mississippi about all facets of this new industry that's coming in. Cliff is with us now. Good morning, Cliff. How are you, sir? Can you hear me?
Hey, good morning, Paul. I can. Yeah, I'm good, Paul. Thank you. I have a little bit of a cold. It's not COVID, but glad to be here.
Yeah. I just told Will, I said, I got a cough, you got a cough, so he might be able to do the show from the host position and the guest at the same time. So we both understand that. All right, first of all, just kind of explain a little bit about how you got here and who Cliff is, and then what Steep Hill is for the people who have no idea.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the chance to be back. Cliff Osbon. I am a pharmacist by education and was not born in Mississippi, but as I like to tell people, I got here as soon as I could. I've been here 25 years and raised kids here and had businesses here. Got to lead in the State Pharmacist Association for a few years. And as we saw the medical marijuana program come in, I really was interested in helping to participate in ensuring a safe supply of product. So we had a little investor group that were interested in doing that, and we contacted Steep Hill, a company out of California. We signed a license agreement with them and licensed their name, so we are Steep Hill, Mississippi, and we'll use their testing methodologies. Their standard operating procedures have been approved in 9 U.S. states. They're in use in a lab in Ontario, a lab in Mexico City, all under the Steep Hill banner. And so we felt like those procedures that were validated for all of those states would be great for us as well. So we have our facility, we have our lab director hired, we have ordered our testing equipment, and we're eager to see the license applications get published in a couple of weeks.
How many employees are we talking about to do this?
Probably this year, just under 12. Around the end of the year, we anticipate that there'll be product in the market for testing, maybe November, December, January, something like that. Yeah. And we'll need to have that fairly small staff to be ready for that. But over time, we anticipate some growth in staffing.
I'm just wondering, Cliff, have you hired anybody? And if you have, or you're looking, what kind of resume are we talking about to be able to fulfill that job?
Well, that's an interesting question. The Department of Health just dropped the final testing regs yesterday afternoon, and I was headed off to an industry event with about 300 or 400 other folks interested in the industry. I did not get to read the final. I read the drafts that came out a couple of weeks ago, and our lab director has to be either a PhD, chemistry, environmental science, biology. They have to be familiar with these type testing procedures on these type equipments, or they could be a master's and have more experience. That's what's required. We have made that first hire for our key leadership position, and we'll be announcing that person next Monday when they officially start.
Where is this facility, the first facility?
So we're in Rankin County, out near the airport.
How much of an area is that going to cover? I mean, because I'm wondering, this is all new to me and most of the people, of course. How many testing centers do you have to have in the state? How many do you think is necessary?
That's a good question. Well, look, I'm a capitalist at heart, so the market will determine how many testing labs we need around the state. My best guess is it's more than 3, it's less than 10. I just don't think the market will support, double-digit number of labs. If so, some people, unfortunately, are probably going to lose their investments. But we don't need one, that's for sure. We need competition. And I've heard of maybe 4 or 5 or so that are organizations that are interested in having a lab in the state. We should know in July when license applications are submitted.
I got you. Do you have franchise area that you cover so you could have more than one, or you just are going to have one in the state?
Yeah, great question. We are licensed for the entire state, and while we'll put our first location in Rankin County, we're already being asked by prospective clients, cultivators and processors, would we consider a location south of that? Would we consider one north? And so we will see over the coming months if we can create those other locations.
Now, there's nothing in the Constitution, nothing in the law that we passed that says you have to have any municipality other than a business license. You don't have to. There's nothing in the law that says where or when where you can locate. This doesn't apply to testing.
You're right about
In other words,
that. So
it doesn't. The opt-in, opt-out doesn't apply to you guys.
That is correct. It doesn't apply to testing labs, transporters, and a couple of other classes.
What's the? I hope you don't mind me asking this. What's the financial investment to get one started?
Well, it's not as much as a cultivation facility. We hear the same things that you hear, that company A that's going to cultivate has raised $20 million, or company B has raised $30 million that they're going to need. For a lab, it's probably, $2.5 to $3 million that you'll need over the first couple of years to get open, equipped, staffed until that location's cash flow positive.
I know a lot of this was probably at the beginning new to you also. Did you go to a lab and spend some time there to see what they were doing? I'm sure you did.
I did. I made a couple of visits to our sister lab called Steep Hill, Arkansas in Little Rock.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, the guy in charge of that lab, like me, is a pharmacist as well. And so he's got a great staff. I've been able to watch them at work and come back and take that learning. And we'll be sending our lab director there. It'll be part of her kind of 3-part training to go up to Little Rock and kind of see boots on the ground how an operating lab works. Will
the state have any certification requirements for you guys as far as the lab is concerned?
They're going to require what most states require, called ISO accreditation. That stands for International Organization of Standards. And you'll pass automotive manufacturing plant and see their ISO certification on the sign. Likewise, we'll have to certify for ISO.
I forgot the name. It's almost like the sommelier, or as far as wine's concerned. What are we calling these people who are working at the dispensaries? Do you remember?
Gosh, I've heard all sorts of names. Some that are very sophisticated, like patient care consultant. I've heard.
I'm sure
like
somebody
on Tinder.
Bud tender, that's it. Bud tender is the thing that I've heard. But you guys you won't have anything to do with teaching them or anything else. This is strictly testing the THC in the product.
That's right. We'll test for the THC potency. We'll test for presence of heavy metals, pesticides, contaminants that could hurt people. We have to make sure that those are not present.
Cliff, is everything got to come through you? How's this going to work? Is everything in the general area got to come through you, or does the dispensary, whomever owns that, contract with you to test the products that they're going to get in their shop?
So cultivators that are growing the flower and processors that are turning it into edibles or vape cartridges or some other use form all have to have their product tested by batches. And so either our lab or one of the other licensed labs will have to do that.
Is that once per growing season, or is it going to be like once every 2 weeks, or how do you do that?
That's a great question. Okay, I started reading the final regs that dropped yesterday afternoon, this morning before the show, and it looks like for a cultivator that's growing thousands and thousands of pounds of flower over a course of a season, every 10-pound batch of flower will have to be tested. So that's cool, because that means we're going in and testing relatively small samples and testing lots of them, and that helps the public ensure, to the best of everyone's ability, that the product is safe and ready for use.
Do you ever have to kind of look at what a failure rate was when you were in Arkansas, what the industry standard is? In other words, this is too hot, or this is... that question and more when we come back. Very, very interesting. It's just a whole new side of the industry that we haven't thought about. Cliff Osbon, president, co-founder, former pharmacist, continuing to, still a pharmacist. Steep Hill, Mississippi. I say that. Are you still in the pharmacy business now?
No, not at this time. I had a large pharmacy company we sold a few years ago.
Got it. More with Cliff coming up next. FDIC. Cliff Osborne's with us, president and co-founder of Steep Hill, Mississippi. It is remarkable, though. What worries you more when you're testing, to have something escape that's lower than it's supposed to be on THC, or higher than it's supposed to be on THC?
That's a great question. It's an important question. Look, here's what will really impress the citizens of the state if they knew it. I talk to almost all of the major cultivators from time to time, and None of them want bad batches out. I mean, let's think about it. They have a conscience. They don't want to harm anybody, but it would also be horrible for business for them to have a bad batch go out. And so they understand that our testing and occasionally failing a batch of their product that will cost them money if it has to be destroyed is really a good thing in the end. It's good for the industry, but more importantly, it's good for patients. And so we do not want product going out that is too hot. I think you used that word earlier, too high THC, that violates the regs. And we don't want something going out that's sub-therapeutic, that's not going to help anybody. They waste their money.
But how do you define, Cliff, a batch? Because, I mean, if you're making T-shirts and on this run you got some defects in there, you'd understand that. Is it everything grown for that year? Is it everything? What is a batch? How do you define a batch?
You know, just yesterday afternoon, the Department of Health published the final regs for testing and said for the flour, for the natural product, a batch is a 10-pound sample. So if we go into one of these huge cultivation facilities and there's a big room and all total there's a few hundred pounds of flour growing, we have to sample every 10-pound section and collect a sample and take it back and test it. And there's a real rigorous process that would bore everybody that's listening, but it tells how we have to collect incremental gram by gram samples. You know, for perspective, a gram is about what a paperclip weighs. So it's not a big sample. We have to go through the room and take sample after sample and go back and test it.
It's absolutely amazing. And if it is found, let's just say to be too hot or under the THC, what do you do with it? You just contacted them and they are responsible for destroying it?
Well, on the THC, if it's too hot, there may be things that they can do to mix it with a batch of lower potency and have it retested. It's called remediation.
I got you, yeah.
But there are some things that are a fail. So if a product tested for a certain pesticide, that might be it. It just has to be destroyed. The risk of harm is too great, and so it can't go forward in any form.
Could they do the same thing if it's too low, mix it with some that's high and just get it back to the normal amount? And by the way, what is that? What's that final level that we're talking about?
I think the maximum percentage for flour that's allowed in Mississippi is going to be 30% THC in the flour and 60% in a concentrate, like a drop that would go into the tongues or in a vape cartridge.
And you'll be testing all of that one way or the other. Are you testing? I have no idea how the edibles come into this. How do they differ from the raw flour itself?
Yeah, well, they'll have a specified milligram concentration, just like when you buy an over-the-counter medicine and it's 10 milligrams or 500 milligrams. We'll have to test and make sure that the final concentration falls within a certain percent of what's declared on the label so that people can trust that they're getting what they think they're getting.
I didn't think about this, too, but I understand as far as the flowers and doing all of that. But the edibles have to be made also in Mississippi. They can't come from outside. They
do. I've toured a couple or three facilities around the state where they're starting to build out their cultivation and processing facility, and they have these huge commercial kitchens where they'll take the THC and put it into, as everybody loves to say, a gummy. I think we try to use a different. We can't have animal-shaped edibles in Mississippi. They can only be geometric shaped. We can't have anything that might appeal to children. But they have to infuse that into the gummy, and then our job at the lab is to take that edible and dissolve it and test it and make sure that it meets all the standards set by the state.
Also, you can test pesticides in an edible too, as well, I'm sure.
That's correct. Yes.
You know, I watch, and I caught myself watching this the first time I saw it, and it's pretty entertaining. Jim Belushi's Farm, a reality show. And I think he's got places in Oregon, Colorado, Oklahoma, Illinois, and I'm reading this, Massachusetts. So there's my cough. He's expanded quite a bit. But one of the things that you really do get an education from is how much goes into this on the different signature brands that he has and the way he gets to those things. So it is a science, is it not?
It really is. It's so impressive. I had a chance to visit the largest cultivation facility currently operating in the Southeast. It's just outside of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I was there a few months ago. And it's amazing. The scientists, the cultivators that are there, and exactly what they have to do to bring the product to market in a way that meets the state's regs. It is a machine every bit as impressive as an automotive manufacturing plant or something like that.
Yeah. Do we have penalties that are listed in the regulations? I don't know if I haven't seen these in the law itself, or is that something the health department is going to do? And the reason I say this is after it leaves your hands, it's going to be touched by several other people before it actually gets in the dispensaries. And after you've tested it, but ultimately it winds up in the dispensaries, and it is a bad batch, someone has an adverse reaction to it, how culpable are you as a tester to trace that back to your lab?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we do have accountability to the state, and they actually will have some proficiency testing to make sure that when we turn out a result that says this has 10.1 milligrams in it, that it really has 10.1 milligrams in it. As far as financial penalties or such as that, I'm not familiar with those yet.
Yeah, I'm sure you're following the progress of this and the turnkey operation on most of this to get it happening. Do you agree that you think it's going to be probably fourth quarter this year and maybe more likely first quarter next year?
Yeah, I do. I think most people are thinking that product will be ready for testing and marketing in somewhere between November of this year and January of next year.
So that's when the plants are going to be ready. And how long does it take from the time you plant the seed to the time you start harvesting?
Yeah, it's just a few months, and I'm not an expert in that. You'll need to get a cultivator on here to talk about that, but it's just a few months.
Anything else you want to mention, sir? Because I mean, it's very interesting, and I'd love to have you back and keep us abreast of what's going on and some of the progress on this one. But anything else that we failed to mention here to enlighten the people?
No, I'd love to come back. I think that we're going to continue to see some regulations issued over the coming weeks. The Department of Health needs to have all those out by June 2nd. They'll have license applications out in June as well. And that'll be an interesting time for an update on your show. People will want to know more about, okay, now that all the regs are out and there are thousands of pages out, what do they all contain?
Are the regs going to, as far as you know, mirror those of other states now, or are we starting over?
No, I think there's some similarity, and I'm not an expert in the other states. I know a little about Mississippi and almost nothing about the other states. But when I show the regulations that we have to my colleagues in other states, they'll say things like, oh, that looks like California, that looks like Oregon, that looks like Illinois. So I do think each state learns from the other states how to develop best practices to protect the public.
Any you've seen so far, Cliff, that you just absolutely disagree with?
No, that'd be hard to say. I mean, but you know, when you look at regulations, there's always things you think, wow, I wish they had gone a little bit different here, but that's their prerogative how to establish those.
How do you set your price of what the testing cost is going to be to the producers coming through?
Yeah, great question. We have to look at that. So the instruments that we ordered just to get started, there's over $1 million worth of instruments that we buy just to get started. We have scientists on staff. We have cars to go pick up samples. So all of that factors in. And then, of course, our investors want some reasonable level of return on their investment. And so all of that calculates. But in from state to state, I think you can look at Oklahoma and Arkansas and see that a panel of all these different things we've talked about testing are usually a few $100s per batch for the cultivator or processor.
You think your progress is probably the same as the other facets or the other parts of the business, like the not only the dispensaries, but also the people who are supposed to destroy this? And is everybody about the same level of where they are now?
There's a wide variety there. I've been in a number of proposed cultivation facilities. Yeah, and I think there's some other testing labs that I'm familiar with that are at work, but I'm not sure who compares to who and how far along they are.
Always good talking to you, sir. Looking forward to get you back on.